I just brought all the not sexy tips here, all the things that people don't want to acknowledge, but I know as somebody
and do these very boring, specific things on Christmas Day. Hey everybody, welcome to From the Ground Up. I'm Zach Conway here with Kelsey McKenna. Kelsey, it's somehow the end of the year, which is super weird and upsetting and exciting at the same time. That time moves that fast. Can you believe it?
I can't. I'm really surprised. I feel like we were just at Future Proof, and that was months ago. For some reason, this last quarter has been very fast.
Blurry, but a lot of good stuff going on. But it's a good segue into what I think we want to talk about, which is as you have these kind of wrap-up periods at the end of a very busy year, what are the things you as a business, and we want to talk about like what we are doing as a business at Seeds that may be helpful, that can kind of get you set up in a way to make that next year optimal, to actually think about what are you planning for, that if I kind of put these pieces in place and prepare in the best way possible, then I can execute in the best way possible when I have sort of that kind of arbitrary but important clean slate of a fresh calendar year. So let's get into it. All right. So we at Seeds, we are getting into the end of the year, and every year we really try to align on what did we just learn over the last 12 months, and what are we doing about that to then optimize for what we're going to be doing in the next year. And so we want to break down, how we think about kind of the top three. I have my top three, Kelsey. I think you have your top three ways to be thinking about planning for the year ahead and what you can be focused on and what the most important things to be doing are, so that you can kind of hit the ground running with that fresh calendar year and optimize as best you can with your team, with what you're building toward, how you're trying to grow, all these different things. So it's kind of a broad topic, but it's like, what is this basic framework? How can we kind of simplify, end of the year into Q1, how advisors in particular think about how to, start their year off right. So Kelsey, we haven't even talked even a little bit about what's on our lists. Yeah. So we're just gonna jump into it. What's on your list?
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into this, but I tried to focus on kind of like three things to either ask yourself or remind yourself if you're the leader kind of going into the next year and trying to lead planning or kind of like create a plan going into next year. So the first one I have, I brought this one because this podcast is about growth. So I'm assuming a lot of folks listening are interested in growing their business or growing something, hopefully, if you're listening to this, or else,
plants.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe growing plants, growing something. But if you want to grow a business, so one of the things that I would recommend is really sitting down and thinking about how you want to grow. A lot of times growth, I think, gets distilled down into numbers of we want to increase our number of clients, our AUM number, or we want to increase how many leads we get, how many leads we convert. So a lot of numbers, a lot of like result metrics that get thrown around. And I think one really critical piece of the puzzle is how you intend to grow. So if you think about it, you can kind of think of growth as I want to make more per customer, or I want to get more customers who are paying me, or both. And then within I want to get more customers, you can think about how you may want to get more of the same type of customer that you already have, or you need to start getting more customers that are not like the customers you have. And based on the answers to those questions and how you want to break down those goal metrics across those different subsets, that's going to lead to very, very different strategies and projects and work that your team is going to have to do next year. So if one of your goals is growth, I really recommend starting there and just more clearly defining what type of growth you want to achieve next year. And just as like a hint, it's a lot easier to make more per customer or to get more of the same customer than it is to start getting more new types of customers in terms of the amount of effort, projects, work, thought, all of the things that go into growth initiatives. So that's something that I would definitely think about now, so that in January you can really be setting the foundation of this is the type of growth we want to achieve. What would have to be true for us to be able to achieve this growth in this way? So that's my first tip.
I like it. It's a good tee up for one on my list. And so it's just the look back. It's the analysis of, and just focused on kind of, because we can get into like the services you provide and sort of your quote unquote product. I'm sure we both have things on the list related to that, but on kind of more sales process and your messaging and your marketing tactics and all of that, what worked and what didn't. And it's like, you think about it as it happens over the year of, oh, that was a terrible sales conversation. And what did we learn from that discussion? What worked, what didn't. Like, what I sent out this email campaign and we got those metrics or whatever. But at the end of the year, you have an opportunity to zoom out and really look at across all of the messaging, across all of the tactics, all the stuff within the sales strategy, what was terrible and what worked. And like, even, just sort of like a micro example, as Seeds thinks about marketing strategy, marketing initiatives, and how our messaging resonated or didn't through a platform like LinkedIn. And I was just pulling up and reviewing, here's in rank order impressions across posts across the last 12 months, because that, macro data across 12 months does then all of a sudden you see the trends of, wow, that messaging with that partnership and that, positioning clearly was working. And I can see that it worked in this month and this month and this month when we were doing it in that way. So, okay, let's lean into that. It can really inform, kind of big picture strategy ideas around messaging, marketing, and so on. But also, the specifics of execution. So that's, I think just, what did you learn across your sales and marketing approaches? What worked, what didn't, before you're like, hey, this is the new plan for next year. I'm just kind of throwing some new ideas out there. Remember that you probably just learned a whole bunch of stuff. You just kind of need to sit and reflect on it and look at whatever data you have.
Yeah. And I would encourage, like, tying both of those together, I would encourage folks to not just think about what sounds the best or the most exciting growth initiative, because I do notice this a lot. I notice a lot of firms who are nowhere near close to maximizing like their current book of business, and there are possibly more services and more value they could deliver to their current book, who are chasing, and there are opportunities like remotely to serve more of the same demographic that they already know exactly how to speak to talk to service, to onboard. There are opportunities there because especially post-COVID, a lot of individual like clients are more open to remote like relationships. So there's so much room for growth in the less like sexy areas of growth, which is like, oh, I have more business owner clients. I'm making more per customer. Like it's much more fun to say, yeah, I have a next gen program I'm launching and I'm now going after this new demographic. I'm now going to start supporting startup entrepreneurs, not just small business owners. Like that's really more exciting, and that may feel better, especially to an entrepreneurial minded advisor, but you may be missing a major opportunity to actually hit your growth goals way more easily so that you can have more revenue, more profits to then go chase the more exciting things that you want to do in the future.
It's such a great point. Like, and it does tie all of that sort of just reflecting on what works, what doesn't, because so often the opportunity is staring you in the face. Like,
yeah.
You've got these, gold nuggets that you've just, it's the shiny object, whatever. Let's go tell this, grander vision, whatever, which is not a bad thing. But as long as you're capturing, what else that's already kind of sitting there that you can take advantage of. Okay, awesome. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is actually like another. I just brought all the not sexy tips here. All the things that people don't want to acknowledge, but I know as somebody
and
who
do these very boring specific things on Christmas Day.
Yeah, no, but it's the reason I'm bringing them is because I feel like it's very overlooked, and I feel like it's actually the best advice. So, it's similar, but for yourself. So I recommend in December kind of slowing down and figuring out what can I and should I be offloading to others or to systems or to technology or what have you next year to free me up to do what only I can do. And this applies in startups. We talk about this all the time, me and you, with you, and I have to talk to myself about this all the time, but I see it a lot with advisors who I'm speaking with too, especially in that growth stage where you are the expert at everything. You're the expert at selling, you're the expert at planning, you're the expert at investments, you're the expert at the systems, and then you have some helpers, some like helping hands who you delegate to. But I would really recommend sitting down and asking yourself, what brings you joy? What do you really feel like good about and you're thriving when you're doing it? And what can only you do at the company that no one else can do, that if you had more time to do it, you could then really grow the business and hire more people to do the things you don't like to do, or onboard or create more systems or process to do those things. So I think December is a good time to do that because everyone is kind of, even if it's like an arbitrary thing, it still is a time to kind of reset and reflect. And that's going to become projects. That takes time. Training your team, telling them how to do what you do, creating a system to allow multiple people to do the things that you do today is going to take time and it's going to take resources. So it's something that needs to be planned for and accounted for in the new year.
It's great. It's also, again, a good segue into my second similar idea is so you're hitting on like what I'm trying to accomplish in the year ahead. Have I really optimized for how my team is set up, and do I have the right people in the right seats? And am I giving up the things that I should give up to optimize my time as a leader in the business? So advisors, like in startup environments, tend to be doing it all, and they're the visionary down to doing the client meetings, down to in the weeds operational things and everything. And so if you are seeking growth, how do you pull yourself out of those things, but then more specifically, like, what are the roles that I need to place? So the thing I had on my list is then, I guess, kind of the other side of the coin, which is the people management aspect of, if you get the right people in the right seats, which in and of itself is nearly impossible to do correctly or perfectly. But if you're on that path, then how do you manage well from there on? And that, we've talked on the podcast and obviously internally a million times about that's been a learning process for me of what that needs to look like, and having any structure around, how you interact with your team, how you offload work, how you empower team members to work together in the right way, be clear about what the vision is, but don't micromanage the vision. All of those things, like the end of a year, again, I think now we're putting a lot of to-dos on people's plates, but to start to think about what is maybe a better version of that people management stuff that I didn't do last year, that if I improve upon a little bit, can really activate people to do the things that I put them in seats to do, is worth the time and effort, right? Do you as a leader and those team members, are you really aligned on them feeling good about what they're accomplishing in their role? Is that a mutually agreed thing going on? So anyway, I think, and that's not even to say, like, that's a work in progress for me and for Seeds in the business. So it's not to say, optimize it in the most perfect way possible, but start to think about it. Like, what is that? If you could now look a year ahead and then think about reflecting on, at the end of next year, what could that more perfect sort of people management structure look like at that point?
Yeah, I've said it before on the podcast, but to tie the two together, it's weird that we have like stuff that goes together without talking about it.
If it's not 3 for 3, it's going to be super
I know, it's going to be
sad.
it probably won't be given my third as an unpopular one with you.
Oh, boy.
But I think to tie it together, like people is where everything kind of falls apart. So like if you think about any business, I always think of people as like the foundation. Even if the business is just you're still a person. So that is really where everything kind of thrives or dies, is in the people and how the people are managed. And like I just mentioned, you are a person. So that's why I brought it up as like one of my tips, is because I think it gets overlooked. Because the person kind of setting the trajectory, setting the vision and creating the plan or approving of it, that person is looking at it from their perspective and is not necessarily then leveling up to look at themselves as a major player in that equation that can be managed. You know what I mean? So like how Zach acts as the CEO and founder of Seeds can be managed by Zach, because, and so that job description and what you do next year is going to be different from last year. And so I think it's really important to think about that, because every other thing stems from there. You're like the one variable that can't change at Seeds is you. Well, I guess technically it could, but you would be the most difficult variable to change. So everything else has to build up around the things that you are good at doing, not doing, what have you, at the stage. And it's very similar in advisory businesses. So when you see like an advisor who loves planning and loves being a practitioner of financial advice, right? They usually need like an operator person, someone to operate their business, someone to actually keep the trains running, to grow the business, to create all of that stuff, versus someone who loves running the business of having a financial advice company and wants to then bring on people to be doing planning and to be doing investments and acquiring technology and all these things to streamline the things that are more so just like the means to the end of delivering value to the customer. So those are two different, very different founders, and you should be thinking about it in that way, and not just kind of taking generic advice of how to structure your team or how to build a job description based on what industry you're in.
I like that point though of, the CEO has a job rec too, that like, and that job description, should it be changing for the sake of growth and scale and whatever you're deciding, you are hiring other people to not just take off your plate on your day to day, but to optimize the way the business is running and how you're growing and all those things, making it super, super clear to everyone on the team that yes, I am seeking to not be in these functional roles across the business. And now my job responsibility more specifically looks like this, and this. This is like a broad point. Like, what's the quote we always butcher? But the problem with communication is the assumption that it's taken place. So, hiring for roles that you think as the leader are replacements for functional things that you are doing, ironically doesn't necessarily translate into an understanding that you don't do those things anymore, or you're doing those things in a different way. So anyway, I'm regurgitating what you just said of like what at the beginning of the year, we are in our next large meeting, which we were just talking to the team about today. As I kind of lay out the org chart of 2025, my name and roles and responsibilities will be part of that discussion. I need to make it clear that this is what I'm seeking to do versus not do. We are going to see if our third items are aligned or not. So what's your third? I'm very hopeful.
Yeah. So my third is likely not aligned with you, but and apologies to listeners if you hear a child.
I'm surprised mine are not.
I heard yours for a second. We're right at that final Christmas push here.
It's the end of the year. There's candy canes. There's disruptions in schedules. There's like missed sleep. You flew across the country.
I'm in San Diego. They're jet lagged. They are outside the door.
It's all unraveling.
I think we're good. Okay, so my third, I will be surprised if it's aligned with your third. But it is to be disciplined. So to spend time really, really thinking about, and I know I've like been beating this dead horse internally, what are we saying no to next year? Because through everything I just described in terms of how do you want to grow, what should your role be, inherent in all of those questions these are the things that are not going to happen next year. And when we think about creating like a roadmap for next year, or what projects we need to tackle, or how are we going to grow, or all of these different things. There are so many ways to do this. And I think it's really important to think about at the beginning of the year, before it gets too messy and you get too far into projects, what are we not doing? What are we definitely trying to not accomplish or not touch this year? And the way I would think about it is like, you have to, especially as a small growing company, you have to focus all of your resources, or as many of your resources as possible, on the most critical things that need to happen. Because if you don't, it's not going to be as impactful. So there's this saying, again, I can't attribute it, but there's someone who I've listened to or read a book on before who talks about it like sunlight. So if you're in the sun, it's spread everywhere. But if you have a magnifying glass, you can actually like create fire, right? And that's the issue, is a lot of times if you're taking on too much, I would rather us and internally at Seeds, and I would recommend, focus on a few really, really important things really early and get that momentum and get things moving and make a difference in meeting your goals before you expand out and start touching other things. So I guess my tip is to decide, make a list of what you're saying no to, like for sure. And then it will be a win if you get so much done next year that all of a sudden you're in Q4 and you're like, wow, we finished everything that we said we were going to do to make a dent in our plans to grow this business. Now we can do more. That's exciting. But to take on and give your team a huge laundry list of stuff that you're hoping, if you do like half of it, maybe you'll meet your goals, that's very demotivating to you, but also to your team. And people are going to be flailing around and like running around like chickens with their head cut off, basically.
It's Christmas miracle, I guess, that we're 3 for 3 sort of aligned, I think.
Wow.
My third, so what are the products and services and things that I want to improve upon in those areas in the new year, based on kind of like the same as my marketing and sales and growth points, based on whatever we've learned over the last 12 months. But then the part 2 to that is the point of it's really hard as the founder, where you have to thread the needle on deliver the vision, deliver like what is the broader, bigger, exciting, compelling thing we're aiming at. And it is important to reestablish that. And we've been doing that at Seeds, reestablishing that at the end of the year and going into a new year. So like you have to do this big zoom out thing. And advisors who have big aspirations of growth and they want to bring in new advisors and they want to start a next gen thing and they want to do all these things. It's like, yeah, you need to lay out that broader vision, but then it's your point of, okay, when January starts and we need to move the product forward and we need to improve the services and do these things, what realistically can those things and should those things be based on what you learned, but what can reasonably be accomplished and in what order? So there's 2 risks, right? There's the risk of never coming out of the sky and actually getting down to, okay, what exactly are you doing in January and February and March and through the rest of the year? That's one of the risks. And then the other risk is more your point of, if you can get that detailed on what you want to actually accomplish, are you being realistic, and do you have the resources, and do you have an optimal team, and have you hired enough, or are you like 6 months behind on who would need to be in certain seats in certain roles to get anywhere close to those 10 things you put on the product list? Because yeah, if you stay up in the sky, or the detailed list is just too long and you haven't really optimized for it, then everybody's going to be disappointed in 12 months from today. So yeah, I think that's sort of what you said. I think
sort of, yeah. I think it's connected for sure. No, yeah. I think it is really like you can create that list. I think where it gets really difficult is that it can feel like everything is pressing. because you know all the stuff that needs to happen in order to meet the goal. So it can feel like I want to communicate that to the team. Like I need to tell everybody, like, these are all the things that have to happen. These are the things that have to happen. And I think it's okay to do that. But what's most important to do is to be very, very clear with, these are all the things that need to happen. It's a lot of stuff, but this is the correct order. This is the sequence of the things that need to happen.
There's a level in there that I didn't include that you're saying. That I think is because this has been the progression for us over the last, whatever, month and a half. Go back to pie in the sky vision, then lay out the 30 things that we know and have conviction on need to happen. And I think we are just getting to clarity on these 15 shouldn't even really be on our radar for 2025. We know they're fundamentally necessary longer term, but that I think is what you're saying. It's like we can lay out all of the list, but then what's the word you used? Not diligent, disciplined on, okay, but like what are the things that from that list? And the reason this is like so important is because if you have a team, it's really easy, even if you have just yourself, because this actually happens a lot to me with myself. But if you have a team, it's going to be really easy. Hypothetically, a lot of this work seems, we could do that. And everyone likes to tell their boss, of course we could do that. Of course that'll be easy. But there's always going to be hiccups. There's always going to be delays. There's always going to be stuff that's unaccounted for and challenges that we don't foresee. And so that's why I think it's so important to not just go to your team and be like, hey, how quickly could we do all of this? But to really sit as the leader and say, and you have to know the business really well as well. If you have a team that doesn't know all the ins and outs of your business, it will be impossible for them to tell you how quickly they could get to that milestone or how quickly they could develop that project or what needs to come first, second, and third, what's dependent on other things. It's going to be really hard for them to do that. So take the time to do it yourself before you ever even, not that you shouldn't seek feedback, but before you ever say, okay, go work on this, spend time, money, resources on this, you have to be pretty sure that it's the right strategy to take and that it's the right plan that gives you the best shot. And it's never a for sure, but you should have that vision and you should have your goals. And from there, work back to what absolutely has to be true. And how do I make sure in smaller chunks, the things that absolutely have to be true and we cannot survive without happen, what they're most likely to happen, obviously, because it's never for sure. Yeah, I think like it is a sort of back to the people management stuff. If to be consistently yesed from your initiative idea you want brought to life next year at any point, and you're getting we're on it, as opposed to, well, let's break down what that what we say, what is definition of done, what are the requirements,
what is the phased approach, what is phase one,
what is the phased approach. Because you look at advisory firms, our own included, where it's like, we were going to let's roll out a next gen sort of marketing vertical and content plan. Cool. You can say that, but what does that mean? What would it be? What would it look like to be completed? Who needs to be involved? Are there external resources that need to be included? How are we measuring success? There's very often, fortunately and unfortunately, a lot more detail that goes into any kind of new idea that, you need to pre-plan for. And that's why, by the way, there's sort of this natural, it's good and bad in that I like to really break down, as it relates to product stuff, to get fairly in the weeds on a spec of a product feature, because only then can you really get to, oh, wait a second, this is way more complicated and will require way more dev stuff or whatever it is, whatever's tied to that thing. So it's like, and you have to zoom out, zoom way back into a lot of detail, and then come back up a level to decide, okay, these are the things, because we generally understand what they are and what it entails, who's going to execute, and, have a clear plan for all of it. So,
yeah, you're making me, though, I have to add one thing, because I just realized as we're talking through it, I should have said this as like part of the how, because it is very helpful and it's been so helpful for us. If you're trying to figure out like what absolutely has to happen for us to meet our goals, I think the best way to do that is to spend a ton of time on understanding and picking apart the challenges. So why can't you meet that goal tomorrow? Like ask yourself, why can't my company, why didn't we do it last year? What stopped us from doing it? And spending way more time on the challenge itself or the blocker itself is going to make solutioning like the most minimum viable product solution for that a lot easier. And so I think that kind of ties to everything we've been talking about here a little bit, because it is really this idea of like, there are all these pieces to the puzzle. There's people, there's the product or the service offering, there's marketing, there's growth initiatives, there's all this different stuff. But if you don't understand the challenges your business faces, then you really can't properly solution it. You can't figure out what absolutely has to happen and who do I need to hire and what tools do I need that I don't have and what process do I need. It may very well be like sometimes the answer is way more simple than you think. The answer could just be, I don't have the right people. Like I'm dragging around a bunch of people who can't execute anything that I've given them over the last 3 years. And you've just been avoiding that as the answer. And instead, you're trying to come up with new ways of communicating with them and new project tools and all this stuff. And you're working around this major blocker that if you never remove the blocker, you're never going to achieve your goals. So that's an example.
It's the same thing with your point earlier on where growth can be found is often kind of staring you in the face, and where root problems are maybe staring you in the face as well. And it should be sort of like that wake up call moment at the end of a year where you're restating growth goals or initiatives that were the exact same thing the year before. Mm-hmm. So what is that telling you about, what needs to change in terms of planning for that thing, or figuring out in terms of personnel or business structure or whatever that blocked you from it last time? Mm-hmm. Well, we made it through 2024, which is just weird to say and think about. And it's exciting, daunting.
Thank you to all the listeners this year. If you've tuned into a couple of these or all of them, thank you for sticking with us. We
appreciate it. We appreciate it. And the thing, of course, that if you really just want to jump to what's going to help you in 2025 as an advisor, specifically trying to actually operationalize investment management, make your lives easier, make your relationship with your client really the center of how you talk about investment management, that's our day job at Seeds. So come check out Seeds Investor, www.seedsinvestor.com. And I guess we'll see everybody in the new year. See ya.